Hello everyone, welcome to week 6 with HRMT 632. This week we're going to focus on recruitment and selection. In our today's lecture, part A, we'll talk about recruitment process and some affecting factors, then recruitment methods. Part B, selection plus steps and interview types, stages, and errors. Let's get started with part A. In this week, we're going to talk about what is recruitment and what is selection. These are two different processes. But when we talk about recruitment, it's the process of generating a pool of capable, talented people for companies in order to apply for employment. However, when we talk about selection, is again a process, but this time managers and others at HR use specific instruments to choose from a pool. So the pool has been created, and now is the time to use some tools or methods, instruments like interviews, surveys, tests, in order to choose some people from that pool, those who are mostly want to be very successful in this application. When we talk about the process, these are 6 important steps. What the recruitment team does, number 1, identifies job opening. What are the needs based on the demand in the company? They also review job specifications, make sure each job position has its own handout and specification. They also examine the desired characteristics of the recruits, what we really want to hire, what should be their features. So the recruitment team does this. They also determine recruitment methods. We'll talk about this later in this lecture. And they obtain pool of recruits. They create it and maintain applicant interest during the selection before they go to the selection process. Now, when we talk about recruitment, there are basically 2 types, internal and external. As the internal shows, when you try to upgrade people, promote people, or hire people, recruit people from your company. Of course, there are some advantages for this because those people are already familiar with the structure of your organization. Employee is known to you, and also it gives your employees better motivation. However, this type of recruitment has its own weaknesses. Internal competition can reduce cooperation. Perhaps when you try to hire people from the outside the organization, it's like you're trying to inserting new blood to your system. And sometimes poor morale can happen when the other employees do not have this position or opportunity. Another type is an external recruitment, very common in many companies. The advantages is that you try to acquire skills and knowledge from different people, new ideas, novel ways of solving problems, experiences from other companies can enter your company. But the weakness is that newcomers, well, it takes time for them to get used to the structure of the organization. And perhaps this process would be more expensive for companies. Now, another factors governing recruitment, or in our book, talks about also some constraints. What are some common factors affecting recruitment? Number 1 can be external forces, like if you remember last week when we talked about demand versus supply. What you need to have in your company, what you already have in your company can decide or affect the recruitment process. Unemployment rate outside the company, or what is happening in your city, labor market conditions, the minimum wages, some political factors or social activities outside the company, as well as the image and reputation. What has happened to your company for the last 10 years can also affect. If all people believe that this company is a known company and they respect their employees, So you need to make sure that your recruitment process is as meticulous, as organized as possible. However, some internal forces or factors can affect the recruitment process, like the policies, the structure of your company, and if you remember last week we talked HR planning activities, the size of your company, how much cost are you going to put aside for this, the growth and expansion plans based on your company's strategies. When people want to apply for a job, perhaps one of the most common one is submitting a resume. This is a very common activity. Sometimes this thing happens under the umbrella of recruitment. However, there are some companies or businesses asking people to fill out their online forms or job application form. That is another way that you can apply for a job. Let's go and talk about recruitment method, a very important topic. And in this book, we're talking about top 16 methods. The first one is direct inquiries. This is also very common when there are some people who walk-ins or write-ins. Now, walk-ins means that those people who arrive at your company and submit their resumes or come and talk to you in person. So they're called walk-ins. However, there are some people who send their resumes and express their willingness or interests in this position, and they're called write-ins. And both are under the umbrella of direct inquiries. Number two, we have employee referral, a very common program. Even this is happening right now at UCW, and they encourage its employees to refer some employees or faculty members, and they give them also a bonus amount of money. The third thing is advertising, and advertising can be newspapers, magazines, that solid job applicants for a position. So they believe that we can advertise in order to find for solid job applicants. So this is also very common things in the business. Now, number four is digital. Recruiting is getting a lot of the popularities these days through some platforms. Social media is another area that we need to talk about. And when we talk about social media, can be used by recruiters perhaps in two ways. Now, the first way is that recruiters can post their opportunities on some website like LinkedIn. And number two is that this is one way that they can do. Or even number two is that recruiters may seek information about candidates. So number one, social media can be a place where you put your ads or hiring activities, number one. And number two, some recruiters try to get information about their recruits or employees. Now, these are the two important functions. Number six is that Employment and Social Development Canada. In fact, this is a kind of a federal department, and this department provides some programs and services for employers, and also introduces some potential employees to companies. Number seven, we might have also private employment agencies. Now, they're also very, very common in some metropolitan areas around the world, like in New York City. They also use these agencies in order to find their recruits. Number eight, we have also some search firms, and these search firms are agencies, and for free, of course, they recruit specialized personnel for a company. So if you want to apply, they help you with your application. And how do they get their money? Perhaps it's like a commission. So they get a commission from the companies which are going to hire you. Number 9, we have educational institutions. And when we talk about educational institutions, they're like, for example, high schools, technical schools, or even colleges or universities, where applicants for job positions are selected, usually. So this can be also a kind of a place where you can find your ideal recruits. Number 10, we have also professional and labor organizations. This is also another form of kind of the method we use a lot. Many associations run some placement activities, talk to people, try to have interviews with people, and know more about their skills, about their talents, and then try to introduce them to other companies. Number 11, Canadian Forces or Canadian Armed Forces. They also train a lot of people there, and after their training period, they can introduce some talents or ideal people to other companies or organizations. Number 12, we talk about temporary help agencies. In fact, these are agencies that provide supplemental workers and mainly for temporary positions. So when we need some people for some temporary or contract-based positions, we might refer to temporary help agencies. Number 13, we have departing and past employees. This is also very common. Those employees who are going to leave the companies, they might arrange some other people to join. Even sometimes their relatives or their siblings, children can work in their company. So this is also another common method of recruitment. Number 14 is also very popular when we talk about job fairs. So a lot of fairs and many employees, when they try to showcase their companies and potential recruits, that's another spot you can work in your recruitment activities. Number 15, we have contract workers. Is also getting very popular. There are some agencies who are offering this service. And number 16 is recruitment abroad. So they might hire some people or have some offices in other countries in order to get information to the applicants and get them ready for the recruitment process. But after talking about all these 16 methods, there's another important thing that I want you to put it in your mind, and is that which method is better for companies? That's a very good question. And companies, in order to select one method or a range of methods, they need to answer these questions. So question number 1, how many people are you going to hire? Number 2, what is the skill level at your company? Is it going to be for ordinary positions or you need some specialists? What sources are available? So this is referring to your supply, internal or external. What has worked in the past for you? Which method was very successful for the company and now you want to repeat it again? And number 6, are there labor agreements with specified recruitment options? So there might be some collective agreements in place. We need to think about that. And based on that, we try to select a method. Now, after talking about those 16 methods, talking about which one is better to use, the last thing we're going to talk in chapter 5 in the HRM book is evaluation. I didn't put evaluation here, but I want to tell you. Now, how do we do the evaluation, or can we check the quality of hires and the cost So the first thing that many companies do in terms of evaluation is to look at cost per hire. So if you want to keep it in your mind, cost per hire is one measure or one tool that they can check the quality of the recruitment. Also, apart from cost, they might look at the number of recruits and the quality of hires, both in short term and long term. And that is one way we can evaluate. And then this is at least two important tools you can get a better picture for evaluation. Now, after talking a little bit about recruitment process, when we get ready, when we create a pool of applicants and talents, is the time to talk about the selection process. So chapter 6 in HRM book talks about the selection process. Now, when we talk about selection, is the time we get ready to go for interview rounds of interviews or get information as much as possible from our applicants. So there are a bunch of steps that we need to keep in mind, and that's very important. Step number 1, we try to have a kind of reception of our applicants. So we make our initial contacts through emails, those people who walk-ins, and so they might have some very casual interviews. If you write your letter, letter or resume to the company, so you might receive an email of acknowledgement. So step number 1 is the reception. Those people who are willing to work with you. So you need to have the reception, like ceremony for that. Number B, after the reception is the time for screening your applicants. Now, what's the goal here is to remove from consideration applicants who do not meet qualifications. So those people who are better choice will go to the next step. And for some people who cannot proceed this part, can be left behind. Of course, at the screening time, we talk about WAB, weighted application blanks. Now, when we talk about this is a job application form, in fact, given to the applicants, in which there are a lot of items, and each item has a different weight in order to get their reflections and attitudes. So sometimes companies also give another form that is called BIB, biographical information blanks, a very popular kind of form. So you as an MBA student, always keep in mind. So in step 2 of the selection process in your company, screening, you can use the BIB form. And in BIB form is a kind of a multiple choice format. So that's easy, A, B, C, D. And then they ask you a bunch of questions. For example, how many of your family members have been currently members of law enforcement or this company? Or how many friends did you have in high school compared to other people? Now, this is a popular kind of screening format. So they try to know your opinions, experiences, your previous education, your attitudes and interests. So keep this test in mind. Let's go to step number 3. Step number 3 is the administration of employment tests. Now, step number 2 screening, we gave them a bunch of forms, casual forms, friendly forms. However, when we talk about the tests, there are a bunch of tests like your personality test, ability, very, very popular tests, as you can see here, and some performance tests. How can you do in real scenarios, as well as integrity tests. So when we talk about personality, if you remember in chapter 1, chapter 2 in our OB, when we talked about the big 5 personality test, and that is one of them. So the big five, or maybe your DNA test you gave for your assignment number 1, can be used at this stage. So keep in mind, step number 3, employment test, can be big five or the other common tests. When we talk about ability, they in fact check your general mental ability. And they check how well, for example, how easily individuals can be trained. These are your ability. And they also check your general learning ability, your spatial aptitude, your formal perception, your, for example, manual dexterity, how fast you can work with some machines maybe in this company. When we talk about a knowledge test, so they check your, for example, knowledge of leadership or some structure practices. When we talk about performance tests, they check your physical coordination, spatial visualization. These are some common areas in the performance test. And when we talk about integrity, it is for your honesty and integrity. And there are many tests, so if you want to know more about this, go to your book, page 185. It gives you a better picture of all important tests, and you as an MBA graduate perhaps need to know more about these tests. Step number 4, we have interviews. The selection, some people have the chance to enter this stage, and that is interviews, a very common part. Step number 5, we have realistic job previews. Now, what is this part? Now, when we talk about a realistic job interviews, they involve showing the candidate the type of work. They take you to the company, they invite you to visit their facility. If that job is a kind of a university job, perhaps you can visit the university, visit their facilities. And this is also very common. So they might ask you some questions over there or give you this opportunity to ask your own questions. That happens in step number 5. Step number 6, we have verification of references. So they might call your references, get some reference letters from them, or sometimes background checks or police checks are happening in step number 6. Step number 7 is contingent assessment, and that's an important part. All the medical tests, all the drug tests, or some tests related to your physical health can happen in step number 7. And step number 8 is the time we're approaching the hiring decision. The hiring decision happens here. And be careful, guys, when we talk about hiring, there are some approaches, and basically there are 3 approaches they reach this level. Number 1 is the subjective approach. And when we say subjective approach, some employers look at your previous test results, and they get the picture that, for example, this person did better and the sales aptitude test or the interview, you got a better mark. And then what do we need? We need a person for the sales position. And because this person got the highest mark in the sales test, now you are hired. Now, this form is called subjective. When they look at the area that they really want to hire you for, and if you have a high mark, then you are selected. Sometimes we have multiple cutoff approach, and that is based on fail or pass mostly. So it's not the highest mark or also lowest mark. It's the fail or pass. If you pass that test or that job, then you are hired. If you fail it, so they have to say goodbye to you. But compensatory approach is also very common in a lot of companies. So when they look at the total of all your marks or tests, and then they make a decision. And it is different from subjective, because subjective, is focusing only on one specific mark, one or two. However, when we talk about compensatory, so they look at your overall performance in all the tests, and if you did it well, then you are hired. Let's go a little bit talk about the types of interviews. That when we talk about the types, basically we can put them into unstructured versus structured. So unstructured, as the name shows, so any questions are welcomed, and questions are in fact made up during the interview. This is also common. However, when we talk about structured, the questions are predetermined, and some people believe that structured are better because they have higher reliability and more validity, and that's why they go for these tests. But let's talk more about the types of structured interviews, and they're basically covering these three areas related to your behavior, to some real life situations or previous job related situations, or something related to stress and anxiety. So when we talk about behavioral, these are mostly related to your past behavior. And of course, they're asking you a bunch of questions in order to know what will you do in the future. When we talk about situation, so they ask you some questions on important situations likely to arise on the job that might happen in the, for example, in the future, and what will you do if this happens? And the third category of questions in the structured one, so are related to your stress level, and of course is very useful for your stressful jobs, such as handling complaints, for example. So they ask a bunch of questions. Now, stages in a typical job interview. So let's go and have a very quick look. Interviewers, preparation is very common when you get ready to apply for a job. All your documents are ready. Creation of report is also very important at the beginning of the interview to make sure that the interviewee is relaxed. So you can say something funny, or maybe you go start with the greeting parts, information exchange, all those questions and responses, then the end of your interview, and finally you need to make your decision. But the very important thing that you need to keep in mind as an HR specialist or an MBA student is that what are some common errors during the job interview? So this knowledge would be useful for your future when you're in the panel of interviewers, or maybe you're an interviewee. That's why when we talk about the errors, they can refer to both interviewer, those people who ask questions, and interviewee, the applicants. Now, the first thing is the halo effect, and the halo effect happens when you make your decision based on limited knowledge of the applicant. So you just meet him for 20 minutes, and then so you might lack some information here, and then your judgment or decision can be based on that limited knowledge or information, and that's why the halo effect happens. Sometimes leading questions, so you give hints to the applicants. If you talk about, for example, why have you chosen this successful company? So when you give the word successful, so the person perhaps tries to give you answers in order to cover the term successful, and that's why it's an error in interview. Sometimes the stereotypes, if you remember in chapter 3 in our textbook, so people of different colors, people of for example, so we might have different expectations when we hire an accountant, right? Than a salesperson. So if you still have those stereotypes and make your decisions based on them, that could be an error. Interview domination is another thing. When you try to oversell the applicant, when you brag a lot, when you talk a lot of positive words about the applicants, if the person who is introducing or those panel members, and that can be an error. And finally, the contrast errors when you try to compare this applicant with other applicants, that could be another problem. Thank you very much for listening to this week's lecture. What will happen in the class? We're going to work on a real activity in recruitment, and that is creating a recruitment plan. Thank you very much and have a good day.